My name is Tessa, I'm 31 years old and I live in Portland, Oregon. I work full-time as a web developer for a mid-sized agency downtown. I'm the kind of person who thrives on routine and boundaries. I color code my calendar, I label my kitchen containers, and I always know who is in my house and why. That last part? It's about to become very relevant. Enter my younger brother, Jared. He's 27 and let's just say we could not be more different. While I like structure, Jared thrives in chaos. Or at least, he says he does. He jumps from one idea to the next like a rabbit on caffeine. One month he's into NFTs, the next he's researching van life, then he's telling everyone he's going to be a motivational speaker. He never sticks to anything long enough to build a life around it. I've bailed him out more times than I care to admit, helping him pay rent, fixing his car, even lending him money I never saw again, but I justified it by saying he's my brother. What else can I do? About a month ago, he called me in the middle of the night. He said he had just broken up with his girlfriend, though broken up might be generous since she apparently kicked him out after he spent their rent money on a drone he claimed would kickstart his content creator career. I should have said no. Every cell in my body told me to say no. But there I was, half asleep and still emotionally conditioned to save him, saying, "You can stay for a week until you figure things out." The first few days were okay. He was quiet, stayed in the guest room, mostly kept to himself. But by the end of the week, things started shifting. Dirty dishes appeared in the sink. Empty Red Bull cans multiplied like gremlins across the living room. He started leaving the front door unlocked. Then he brought home a friend, a guy who looked like he hadn't showered in a week, who camped out on my couch with a gaming laptop and left an actual pizza box under the coffee table. Week 2 came and went. Then week 3. He wasn't looking for an apartment. He wasn't applying for jobs. He slept until noon, took over the TV in the evenings, and somehow managed to leave every light on all the time. The guest room looked like a war zone. Towels were disappearing. He borrowed my shampoo, then just started using all my toiletries like they were communal. I confronted him and he brushed me off. "I just need a little more time," he said, always with that innocent smile that used to get him out of trouble as a kid. By week 4, I was losing my mind. I started keeping track of his habits out of sheer frustration. He used my washing machine 4 times a week but never cleaned the lint trap. He left toothpaste smears in the sink. He played loud YouTube videos in the middle of the night. My home, my refuge, felt like a squatter's den. Still, I was holding on. I figured I would sit him down that weekend and give him a firm deadline to leave. But the universe had other plans. It was a Wednesday. I had an unexpected client cancellation, so I decided to come home early and enjoy a rare afternoon of silence and clean air. I parked in the driveway and noticed a car I didn't recognize. I paused. Maybe one of his friends again, I thought, already annoyed. But then I saw something that made my stomach twist. A couple, maybe in their 40s, stepping out of the front door with a clipboard. The man said something and laughed. The woman turned around, looked at the front of the house and said, "It's charming. I love the porch." I walked inside and froze. There were people, strangers, in my living room. Jared stood awkwardly near the kitchen, clearly mid-conversation. The woman turned to me and smiled like I was the real estate agent. She asked, "Is this the main entrance, or is there another door in the back?" I stared at her. Then I turned to Jared. He went pale. The man piped up, "The ad mentioned a backyard with good sun exposure for gardening. Is that true?" I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. My face must have said enough because Jared suddenly became very animated, trying to usher them toward the door, muttering something about how he double-booked the showing. They left, clearly confused. I stood in the middle of the room, my heart pounding. For a second, I genuinely thought I was hallucinating. Then I saw a printed flyer on the dining table. 2BR house, fully furnished. Immediate move-in, $2,400 per month, prime Portland location. I found the Craigslist listing that evening. My house was listed with photos he had clearly taken while I was at work. He had even included the backyard, my workspace, and some flattering shots of the kitchen. I scrolled through the description, each sentence making my vision go redder. He called it an artist's retreat, said it was perfect for couples or remote workers, and claimed that the lease was flexible for the right tenant. I went to confront him. He acted like I was being dramatic. He said, "It's just temporary. I figured we could both make some cash. I was going to split it with you." As if that made it okay. As if turning my private home into a rental scam behind my back was a favor. He even had the nerve to say, "You weren't using the second bedroom anyway." I didn't yell. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just stood there, completely still, until he walked away muttering about how I had no vision. That's when I decided to teach him a lesson he wouldn't forget. I did not sleep much that night. Not because I was afraid of confrontation. I've handled difficult clients, tight deadlines, and corporate politics more intense than anything Jared could throw at me, but because I needed to think clearly. I paced, I journaled, I stared at my ceiling fan in the dark for hours. Rage alone wasn't going to solve this. I needed precision. I needed control. I had seen this pattern with Jared too many times. If I confronted him directly, it would follow the same script it always did. He'd deny, deflect, maybe throw in a guilt trip or a sob story for good measure. He'd twist the narrative into something palatable for himself, make himself the poor dreamer stifled by his mean, uptight sister who just didn't get his vision. No, not this time. This time, I wanted him to feel the consequences. Not hear about them. Not complain about them. Feel them. I wanted the kind of lesson that couldn't be forgotten or reframed. So I opened my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found Lena's name. Lena was more than just a friend. She was someone who knew the value of silence and strategy. We met in college during a group project and ended up roommates for 2 years. She was the kind of person who could host a dinner party while negotiating a contract on speakerphone and still walk away with the better end of the deal. After graduation, I went into coding, she went into real estate, and we kept each other on speed dial. She once helped a mutual friend evict an ex-boyfriend using nothing but paperwork and a deadpan expression. She was perfect for this. I called her and laid out the entire mess. She didn't interrupt. She just listened. When I finished, there was a pause, then she said, low and steady, I'm in. I sent her the Craigslist listing Jared had posted. It was still live. He had used pictures of my home, taken during the day when I was working. I recognized the way the curtains were tied in the living room, the alignment of the spice rack in the kitchen, the blanket folded on the edge of the guest bed. It was eerie seeing your own space presented like a product, like it had already been taken from you. Lena messaged him from a fresh email under the name Emily Waters, a freelance business consultant relocating to Portland. Within 20 minutes, Jared responded. He was eager, almost pushy. According to Lena, he said he had a few strong applicants already and that she should come see it as soon as possible. He also mentioned he was flexible with move-in terms and was only asking $2,400 because the place was premium and came fully furnished. He was so full of it, it was almost impressive. They scheduled a showing for the next morning. Jared told her to come by while I was at work, which of course he thought I still was. What he did not know was that I had already taken that entire day off. While Jared was giving my friend a fraudulent tour of my own house, I was moving out. I had already secured a short-term rental downtown. A studio apartment in a building with good security and underground parking. It was nothing fancy, but it was mine, and most importantly, it was away from him. I called a trusted moving service, arranged a discreet pickup, and boxed only the things that mattered. Personal documents, tech equipment, jewelry, my grandmother's heirlooms, my own bedding, clothes, kitchen essentials. I left the rest. It was intentional. I didn't want to give him the satisfaction of seeing empty walls and stripped-down rooms. I wanted him to think I had simply vanished, silently like air through an open window. Every utility bill had already been shifted to paperless. The thermostat? Set to 85. The water heater? Switched off. Fridge? Emptied. I redirected my mail to my office. And when I locked the door behind me that final time, I stood on the porch and took a breath, the kind that only comes from detachment. Meanwhile, Lena was playing her role like a seasoned actress. She walked through my house while Jared prattled on about exposed beams and modern touches. He told her he had lived there for a few months but needed to move to Los Angeles for a brand deal and was looking for someone to take over his lease. He told her he'd waive the deposit if she could move quickly. Lena kept her expression neutral, asking about neighborhood safety and the quality of the Wi-Fi. She said she was very interested but just needed a few days to transfer the funds. Jared agreed instantly. Of course he did. That night, I drafted a legal lease agreement between myself and Emily Waters. The rent? $1,000 a month. The term? Month to month. The terms? Ironclad. Lena signed it and sent it back. It was official. She was now my tenant and Jared's house of cards was about to collapse. We scheduled her move-in for that Saturday around noon, conveniently when Jared told Lena he would be meeting another couple interested in a showing. As planned, Lena arrived with a moving truck, 2 friends, and a clipboard with the lease in hand. She wore sunglasses and a subtle smirk, and when Jared came back from his coffee run and saw the truck parked in the driveway, he looked like someone had just kicked his puppy. According to Lena, he walked up confused, thinking she had misunderstood the move-in time. Then she handed him the lease. Not the fake agreement he had cooked up over email, but mine. Signed and dated, notarized with my name on it. She said the moment he saw my signature, his face drained of all color. He asked her what this was. She said, calmly, my legal lease for this house, signed by the owner, Tessa Reynolds. He stood frozen for a long, weird second. Then the shouting began. He called me 12 times in a row. I let it ring every single time. Then came the texts, unhinged paragraphs accusing me of sabotage, fraud, and crushing his startup dream. He claimed I had embarrassed him in front of potential clients, ruined his cash flow, and destroyed the one opportunity he had worked hard to build. I read them all without replying. Eventually, I picked up on the 13th call, not because I wanted to speak to him, but because I was tired of the buzzing on my phone. His voice was cracking with fury. He accused me of betrayal, of being jealous, of undermining him out of spite. He said I had gone too far, that I was being cruel, that I was ruining his life. I let him rant. I let him pour out all of his excuses, his delusions, his fantasies about success he thought he was entitled to. I didn't interrupt. I didn't argue. I didn't give him anything to push against. Then, when the air went still and the ranting stopped, I said one thing, steady, final, and without even a trace of emotion. I calmly told him it was my house and he had 48 hours to leave. You would think that would be the end of it. That after being outmaneuvered, exposed, and legally evicted from a house he never had a right to, Jared would finally slink off and take the loss like a normal person. But Jared is not a normal person. He's the kind of person who thinks consequences are temporary obstacles, not endpoints. The kind of person who doubles down when caught instead of reassessing. So it didn't surprise me, although it did exhaust me when, a week after the eviction, I got served. It was a Saturday morning. I was still in my bathrobe with a cup of coffee in hand, trying to enjoy a rare moment of peace in my temporary apartment when there was a knock on the door. I opened it and was met by a man holding a manila envelope. He asked for me by name, confirmed my identity, then handed me the documents. I stood in the doorway reading the first page, and my heart did that slow, cold sink it does when you see something both completely absurd and infuriatingly real. Jared was suing me. In small claims court. For breach of verbal contract and theft of business opportunity. I read the words 3 times over because they didn't make sense the first 2. According to his statement, I had agreed verbally to rent the house to him for 6 months and in doing so had created a binding agreement under Oregon tenancy norms. He claimed that he had already invested significant time and labor into improving and marketing the property and that by leasing it to someone else without notice, I had not only broken the agreement but sabotaged his emerging real estate brand. The documents were full of language he clearly didn't understand, no doubt copied from internet law blogs and LinkedIn entrepreneur threads. He attached screenshots of text messages we'd exchanged about him staying for a week, circled out of context and paired with vague statements about his plans. He even included a picture of the living room claiming he had staged it for tenant showings. I had to sit down. I could feel the rage boiling under my skin like a pot left on high heat, lid rattling. But after I calmed down, I did what I always do, I documented. I printed the deed to the house with my name clearly listed as the sole legal owner. I gathered utility bills, dated before, during, and after his stay, all addressed to me. I had Lena forward me the original email Jared sent her under the Craigslist ad along with the fake lease he had drafted, complete with grammatical errors and a laughable security deposit clause written in all caps. I compiled screenshots of the Craigslist listing, including the post ID and metadata showing the upload date, photo origins, and his contact information. I even included the timestamped conversation I'd had with Lena during the whole setup. Court day arrived 2 weeks later. Jared showed up in a button-down shirt and sneakers, carrying a thin folder and an energy drink. He looked confident, almost smug, like he thought this would be his redemption arc. He walked in with the self-importance of someone who thinks they've finally figured out how to manipulate the system in their favor. I, on the other hand, walked in with a binder. The judge barely looked up when Jared launched into his monologue about verbal contracts and mutual understanding. He tried to present himself as a misunderstood entrepreneur. He claimed I had blindsided him after he had already secured clients. He even said, under oath, that I had approved his listing and agreed to split rental income. Then it was my turn. I laid out everything. The ownership documents, the timeline of his stay, the fake lease, the Craigslist ad. I didn't speak emotionally. I didn't raise my voice. I let the documents speak. The judge flipped through the binder slowly, nodding once. He asked Jared how he could claim to be the rightful lessor of a property he neither owned nor paid rent on. Jared tried to pivot, saying that I had verbally transferred usage rights. The judge didn't even blink. He dismissed the case without hesitation. I thought that would be enough to finally end it, but I was still angry. Not just at Jared, but at the gall of what he tried to do. He could have endangered me legally. If Lena had been a stranger, if he had actually gotten someone to sign a fake lease and hand over thousands of dollars, I could have been pulled into a nightmare of lawsuits and legal headaches. He didn't just overstay his welcome. He tried to weaponize my own property against me. So I filed a report with the local housing authority. I presented them with the Craigslist ad, the fake lease, the communications Lena had with him, and the court dismissal. I emphasized that he falsely represented himself as a landlord, advertised a rental he didn't own, and attempted to secure money under false pretenses. They took it very seriously. Turns out, there are multiple statutes in Oregon related to housing misrepresentation, false advertising of rental property, and unlicensed real estate activity. While they determined that his actions did not meet the threshold for criminal fraud, since no money had actually changed hands, they concluded that his behavior did qualify for civil penalties. He was slapped with a $2,000 civil fine for misrepresentation of rental property and engaging in unlicensed housing transactions. In addition, they required him to attend a tenant education course that covered landlord-tenant law, fraud awareness, and rental ethics. It wasn't jail time, but it was public, formal, and on record. He tried to argue. He tried to plead ignorance. He even tried to say he was just helping a family member find a tenant. But his name was all over the ad and communications. The state wasn't interested in his excuses. He was given 30 days to pay or face further penalties. He called me afterward again, but I didn't answer. He left a voicemail calling me a sellout, a backstabber, a manipulator. Said I had ruined his life to prove a point. He wasn't wrong. I had proved a point. That entitlement has limits. That manipulation eventually backfires. That actions, even stupid ones dressed in ambition, come with consequences. He hasn't spoken to me since. And to be honest, my life has never been quieter or more peaceful. He was furious. After everything, the fake lease, the court stunt, the civil penalty, the voicemail tantrums, I had truly closed the chapter on Jared. It wasn't dramatic. There was no final showdown or tearful goodbye. Just silence. A complete, deliberate, necessary silence. I had locked the metaphorical door and thrown away the key. For the first time in years, my home was mine again. I woke up without that subtle tension in my spine. I didn't check my phone with dread. I didn't have to explain to friends and coworkers why I looked exhausted or short-tempered. It was as if a parasite had finally been removed, and I could breathe again. We went no contact for almost a month. No calls, no texts, no signs of life from him at all. Not that I was looking. I figured he had gone to crash on someone else's couch or spiraled into another one of his harebrained business ventures. He was always a creature of temporary highs and bottomless excuses, cycling through opportunities like sand through a sieve. I didn't care. It was no longer my responsibility to track him. Then came the message from Mara. It showed up on a random Wednesday, completely unprompted. A simple, short DM request from her on an old social media account I barely checked anymore. My heart rate jumped when I saw her name, not out of fear but recognition. She had been the last person to try and fix Jared before I finally stopped. The last person to believe his dreams meant something more than a diversion from reality. Her message was direct, a blend of concern and weariness. She said she thought I should know Jared had resurfaced. Not in Portland, but in Las Vegas. According to mutual friends still loosely orbiting his disaster zone, he had flown out there claiming he had a new opportunity lined up. No one was sure what it was, but the pieces fell into place quickly. He was living out of an Airbnb in a quiet residential neighborhood just outside the Strip. The kicker? He didn't own it. He wasn't even on the rental agreement. He had booked it through a third party and then started listing that property online, again posing as the landlord. It was the same playbook, slightly updated for a new city, but just as flimsy. This time, though, he picked the wrong house. What Jared didn't know, what he never bothers to learn, is that not everyone is soft, forgiving, or easy to manipulate. The owner of the Airbnb was a retired police officer, a no-nonsense man in his 60s who was renting out the place for supplemental income and happened to stop by for a regular inspection. He knocked. Jared answered. Behind him, a couple stood awkwardly in the living room, mid-tour. Flyers on the table. Jared smiled, probably thinking he could talk his way through it. It didn't work. The man called the police immediately. Jared refused to leave, arguing that he had tenancy rights and that he was managing the unit. But there was no paperwork, no lease, no contract, just printed Craigslist ads and the kind of unhinged confidence that only someone deeply delusional can summon. He was arrested for trespassing on the spot. The couple he was showing the place to walked out mid-handcuffing, stunned. No charges were formally pressed. The owner didn't want to deal with court, and apparently Jared played the card of just misunderstood, well enough to avoid a permanent record. But the fallout was immediate. He was blacklisted from every major short-term rental platform in the state. His name and face were posted in private host groups, flagged as a scam risk. The unofficial local registry of known grifters, which most hosts use to protect themselves, now had him at the top. When Mara told me all of this, I didn't feel smug. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt tired. Not for myself I had found peace, but for the endless loop Jared was locked in. A self-made purgatory where every consequence was someone else's fault and every fresh start ended the same way. With doors slammed and bridges burned. Life went on. I didn't respond to Mara's message. There was nothing to say. My house was warm and quiet. My work was fulfilling. I was thinking about adopting a dog. The only echoes of Jared that remained were in past tense stories I told with a slight shake of the head. The kind that make people say, "You're kidding." And then, a few weeks later, there was a small twist, subtle, unexpected, and strangely poetic. He texted me, "You won. Now I understand." I stood in the driveway looking at him, not because it moved me, no, but because it was the first time Jared had ever written anything resembling a confession. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't even an explanation. He had simply given up. And for a man who had spent his life pretending that everything was his fault and that he was not responsible for anything, it felt like the final crack in his illusion. I don't need revenge anymore. I don't need to prove anything. What I needed, what I wanted, was never for him to suffer. I just wanted him to learn the lesson he ran from his entire life. That you cannot live off other people forever, and you definitely cannot steal their home to make a quick buck. There are lines you cannot cross and walk away untouched. He crossed them all. And this time, there was no one left to clean up the mess.